fought for freedom. You believe in authority, I believe in myself. I'm a Molotov cocktail, you don't Perignon, baby. What's that confused look in your eyes? What I'm trying to say is that
she's a rebel, she's a saint, she's the salt of the earth, and she's dangerous. She's a rebel, vigilante, missing link on the brink of destruction. From Chicago to Toronto, she's the one that they call, oh, what's her name? She's a symbol of resistance, and she's holding on my heart like a hand grenade. Is she dreaming what I'm thinking? Is she the mother of all bombs gonna detonate? Is she trouble like I'm trouble? Thinking a double twist of fate or a melody that she sings. The revolution, the dawning of our lives. She brings this liberation that I just can't define. Well, nothing comes on mine.
You are tuned in to the Circle Day radio show on Resonance 104.4 FM. My name is Yodet Gherez, and this show promotes anarchist theory and all that relates to it. The song you just heard was by Green Day from their 2004 iconic album American Idiot. Rebel City is featured on this week's episode of the Circle Day show. I interview members of the London-based anarcho-socialist collective. We discuss anarchist theory, philosophy, and the types of inspiring organising they do, such as giving presentations to schools. Enjoy. What brought about Rebel City as a group? Tell me about its formation and what its objectives are.
I guess around 2018, 2019, a few of us were thinking that some anarchists want to talk to each other, and a lot of anarchist literature and leaflets and publications are aimed more at other anarchists or people that really have an understanding of anarchism anyway. And what we wanted to do was trying to get across anarchism to people that had never heard about anarchism. Just the way you write things, who you're going to get across to. Put an argument one way, you're going to get to activists. If you put an argument another way or an article another way, you're going to get across to academics. We wanted to really make language simple to get across to people that had never heard about anarchism. So that was the whole start of the project.
Some of us involved in the Anarchist Federation, as it was then, thought it'd be a good idea to have a London-wide anarchist paper, but we wanted to make it a collective effort. We meet up and decide what we want to write about, what struggles we want to publicise, and then people take on writing articles. Then when they've done that, we get together and we collectively edit them and put together an issue. So the aim is to say to people, look, people are struggling to make things better, and ultimately we need to change the world to achieve a fair and equal society, because we don't hear in the news much about people struggling around their housing, strikes, all sorts of things that are going on, and encourage people to fight to make things better, because they're certainly not going to get better through governments or so-called radical parties. They're going to get together through people organising at the base, in their workplaces, on their housing estates, all that sort of stuff.
Anthropological studies by anarchists such as Peter Kropotkin and David Graeber show us how throughout human history, human beings have organised without a ruling class, but in an egalitarian, mutual aid fashion. Give listeners new to anarchist philosophy an idea as to how an anarchist society could function in the modern world. Let's be clear about what the differences and similarities are to the society we find ourselves in now.
It's totally different between cities and smaller villages, towns. You could imagine anarchism happening quite easily in a small village. You would have no leaders, people would come together in, say, the local community hall. People would be in different working groups, working out different things for that village. That village would then federate with the village next to it, and they would work out anything from food distribution to schooling to bus routes. So I think a lot of people can see how it could work on that small scale. I think when you upscale it to something like, let's say, London, people find it much more difficult to get their heads around that. But I think it's not that difficult to imagine if you can break it down. So I would say you break it down to, let's say, a street on state level. So each street could have its own residents group, tenants association. I would call it an anarchist group. They would decide things for their own street. They would then federate or join streets nearby them. They would then federate with the same sort of group. You could look at it in a way we've got at the moment, like ward level things for the council. So you could have nearly a ward anarchist group in each borough, and they federate with each other and work out what they want to do in that area, and they would federate with, let's use the present example again, borough-wide group, borough-wide areas, and you could organise everything then from schooling to roads to who gets what housing, how you distribute food, and any other issue within anarchism. And then I would see that in a workplace, every workplace is run by the workers, and those workers organise for their workplace. And if there's 10 shops or factories on a road, say, they would all talk to each other to organise between themselves. But if I'm in a pharmacy and we've got a workers collective in a pharmacy, we would be linking up with pharmacies all the way around us so that we can provide pharmacy facilities for everyone and no one's missing out. And then you would link up nationwide and internationally. And I would say, people always say, how would you run hospitals or how would you run the railways? You could have people on the railways, say, where there is a local branch and they're organising transport locally, but they're linking up with people from London to Scotland and working out train timetables, where should we be sending trains to, and working out infrastructure like what new trains are needed, what track is needed. And I think all of those can work. It's harder, and it's harder for people to get their heads around to do it, but I don't think it's difficult in this day and age.
Tell me about the Rebel City paper and also the Rebel City book that the group puts together.
So the paper came out first, and the idea was to get across anarchist ideas to people new to anarchism and may have heard it meaning chaos or may have heard it and have a little bit of an understanding about what anarchism is, but not a lot. We hand it out on street corners, we hand it out on demonstrations, we hand it out outside tube stations. It's free. It's got to be understandable by about a 12 or 14-year-old. If you are using complex words or complex ideas, you have to rewrite your article. And we have always got this idea that you can get across complex ideas in simple language. Now, we joke a bit about it's the son of anarchism, or the son as in the newspaper of anarchism, but the Sun gets across quite complex ideas to working class people in quite small articles with the use of quite basic language. Now, we don't agree with the Sun's politics, and there's a lot in the Sun that is quite disgusting and abhorrent to most of us, but that principle of getting across a complex issue in a simple way was what we wanted to do in Rebel City. So the articles hopefully are interesting, they're easy to read, but they get across anarchism in a way a lot of working class people will understand. So that was the newsletter, and we do probably a couple of issues a year, sometimes more, sometimes less, and we've had fairly good feedback. And standing on street corners saying it's London's only anarchist newspaper, I've been leafleting on street corners for probably 40 years. Actually, people take it quite quickly and people are quite interested in it, which is great. With the book, we've started using, one of the other things Rebel City does is we're starting speaking in schools, and we're going into A-level 6 classes and it's difficult to get in. But we're going in and saying, we're real life anarchists, we will come and talk to you about anarchism. And there was a huge number of questions young people brought up. So we wanted to put a book together, which was basically an introduction to anarchism. And again, the whole idea was that the ideas have got to be understandable by sort of 12, 14-year-olds. So lots of people wrote sections for it, and there's about 50 sections in it. Each person was given a maximum of 300 words on their subject, and we were quite brutal that if people wrote even 310 words, it was like, right, you have to cut 10 words out of this, you have to get your ideas across in 300 words. And then we got a couple of 12 and a 14-year-old to read it. Any articles or any chapters that they didn't understand, we sent back to the people who had wrote them and said, you have to rewrite this because it's not easily understandable enough. And people were great, and people did rewrite it. The book gets across, I would say, quite complex issues in very understandable language, and each of the sections is only 300 words, so you're not looking at something that is really daunting, and hopefully the sections follow on from each other. So that, again, sticking by Rebel Cities' principles of getting anarchism out to ordinary people, was where the book went. And we're now on our third print of it, and we've been going around all the bookshops in London, giving each bookshop a couple of copies for free, so that we're getting anarchist books in as many bookshops as we can in London.
Rebel City officially deliver talks in colleges across the UK, bringing anarchist theory to young minds. What has been the general reception from young people to anarchist ideas, and what has this experience been like?
From the students, the response has been fantastic. Getting into schools is always the most difficult thing, and we started off in London. We then got a group called, I'm going to have to come back to you on the real name, but it's something like the Anarchist Education Network. So they put an advert out. So we weren't intending to speak outside London, but because we were getting requests, we decided that we would. Some of those have been done by Zoom, some of them have been done in person, and I think the furthest one away we've spoke at was in Northern Ireland. Every time I think we've gone into a school and spoke, we have been invited back. So once the teachers, lecturers hear us, meet us, see what the class is like, they always want us back. So that's from the school side. From the student side, it's brilliant. When we speak to schools now, we always ask them to put us on before the break or before the end of the day, because the sessions will run over, and schools, lecturers just don't believe us. As soon as it happens, they realise what we mean, because we speak for about 15-20 minutes, and then the rest of the hour is just questions and answers from the students. And I think nearly every talk we have done has gone over time, because the students just want to keep asking questions. And we're speaking mainly to A-level politics students, although not always. And I think without fail, they just want to keep asking questions. Sometimes students don't agree with us, but that's part of anarchism to me, and that's part of the excitement of it. You're getting a discussion going. And from doing it, it can seem quite daunting at first, but, you know, if we don't know the answers, you just say, I don't know, or you ask the students what their thoughts on it are, or you have a discussion around it. So it's really enjoyable.
I think it's been very good. I mean, that if we're honest, there's a mixed reception, but I think anarchism is quite a new concept to a lot of people, and it's certainly a very misrepresented idea. So classically, we're talking to students who've learned a bit about anarchism, but it's still relatively mainstream context. So to actually talk to them about our ideas and what anarchists are doing now is good. You know, we are very misrepresented and misunderstood. You know, anarchists don't believe in organisation. Well, that's standing things on its head, because if you think about it, if we're going to have a society without bosses and leaders and capitalism, then we're going to have to organise ourselves. So we believe in more organisation, not less. We don't want to run this society. We want to run a different society. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to do away with every last thing, but we need to critically look at everything. And I think part of this argument is there are some people who call themselves anarchists who are primitivists. And while we support native peoples like Aboriginal people in Australia or Amerindians or whoever, I think it's a mistake to say we've got to get rid of every last bit of technology and go back to being hunter-gatherers. I mean, that's not tenable. We look at how things are done. We look at different technologies and do we want to continue with them? And the ones that we do want to continue with, how are we going to run them? But, it's a mistake to think that technology is neutral. Some people say, well, you can't de-invent things. Well, we don't want to de-invent them. Some of them we're just going to bin, Rather than say, oh, we've got to have this person as the union leader and we've got to, we should be sucking up to the Labour Party or whatever, all these ways that are disempowering to people and ultimately where people virtually always found themselves sold down the river.
Why should anarchist theory be taken seriously?
To me, just seems the only way of organising society. Getting people to think, I can organise this, or I could do that, is very different from the ways people have been brought up. We're brought up in the family that our parents are in control. We're brought up where our teachers are in control. So from day one of our lives, we're taught about hierarchies are the way forward. So trying to break that is really difficult. And I think what Rebel City is trying to do, and I would love to see hundreds of other groups doing it, is trying to get people to look at doing things in a different way. And for me, that way is anarchism, because I can't see any other way where you do it, where you have a bottom-up structure rather than a hierarchical top-down structure.
The electoral system is a joke, really. Basic premise is you've separated the economy from politics, whereas you've got to put the two together. And also the notion that the idea that politicians are in charge. They're just really sort of servants of the rich and powerful. The anarchist analysis is that that's inevitably how the system works. You cannot change things through the system because even if you have someone who's a bit radical, they become part of the system. And multinational companies and the City of London, all that, have far more power. Things like the military have far more power than politicians, and they are just part of that system. They are just helping run that system. We don't want to run the system. We want to get rid of the system and create a human society, based on cooperation and sharing. The other thing that's thrown at anarchists in this sort of context is, oh, well, people aren't wonderful, so we need people in charge. Well, no, we say we don't think people are wonderful, and that's part of the reason we don't want people bossing us about, because they're not wonderful. If I was bossing you about, I would not be wonderful. It's corrupt in itself, the idea that people having power over other people. We stand that argument on its head. We say we're all capable of good and bad things, but we should work together and look after each other and tackle things that are wrong. I'm a bit old school in the sense that I'm a semi-reform Luddite, and I'm not very keen on social media or very good at it, but I do think it has its place. Part of that is lots of people use it, so it would be silly to ignore it. But equally, I think the strongest communication is often people talking to each other face to face, because communication is not just verbal, it's also interpreting people's tone of voice, their body gestures, all that. That's a high part of communication. I think person to person is very strong in lots of ways, and in terms of really listening to people and tuning into what they say. And we can disagree with people without it escalating into a fight or name calling. Many years ago, I was a pacifist, and although I'm no longer a pacifist, I think it's important to separate what someone says from that person, unless they're a dyed-in-the-wool fascist or something. If we're honest, we've all got things to work out and work through, and but also you can misinterpret what people say. You're not going to change someone's mind by calling them names. They're just going to stay entrenched in their view and march off thinking that person I was talking to was an idiot. The talking and the listening and the changing will stop if you just out and out call them names and condemn them and all that stuff.
How enlightened of you.
Well, I think it's just common sense. It's experience, isn't it?
How can we define freedom?
Anarchism means without rulers. It doesn't mean without rules. I don't have a problem with rules if I've been part of formulating them. Obviously, we need some structure and guidelines, but we all need to be involved in what those are, and as and when we want to change them, then we should get together and change them. So that's what it's about. Too much people see it as either a socialist who believes in equality, but that you have to have a government bossing you about that's going to enforce this equality, which doesn't stand up to scrutiny anyway, and really being equality, or it's freedom, but that's freedom to be poor and freedom to be homeless. There's all these people like Trump and mini Trumps over here, like some of the Conservatives and Farage and that, who talk about freedom, but they just dress it up as free of refugees and stuff. They're not concerned about people living in rubbish housing or people being homeless. Freedom for the rich, and they just try and sell it. They don't want to pay taxes or have any restrictions on what they do, and they try and sell it as, well, that's about freedom for everyone else. Well, it doesn't stand up to scrutiny at all. What's profit? Profit is the difference between value generated by someone working to produce a product or a service and the price. So that is exploitation, because the person who's working does not get the value of what they've done. They get as low a wage as the boss can get away with, and then the boss gets the difference, and that's the basis of why we're in a mess, because we've got that system operating globally, and also the idea that it's right and natural that men should have power over women, that white people should be privileged over black people, and all that nonsense. Unfortunately, the right wing sort of sells the idea that if black people are going to be equal to white people, or women are going to be equal to men, that's at the expense of the other group, which is nonsense. It might be the expense of the bosses, but it's not really. We should all treat each other properly and equally. I can live with the fact that means me changing my behaviour, but it's not a loss. I'm then being more human to people and enjoying a fairer relationship than I am if I think I can throw my weight around and I'm better than, I'm a white bloke, if I'm better than black people or I'm better than women. I mean, that's just nonsense. And, equally, even where there is a power relationship, as there is between adults and children, for example, adults should still listen to children a lot more and respect the fact that they are a human being and they are growing and developing, and part of that growth and development is allowing them and encouraging them to be more and more free, learn things, and there's a lot of room for change in that regard. And where again does abuse come from? It comes from that idea of hierarchy.
What you want to win isn't the only goal. You will win what you wanted, but you haven't brought people along with you. And you might have a news Abercrossing, but you don't have a strong community that could then argue or demand or work towards other things they need as well. And I think it's really important getting as many people to be involved and as many people as possible to see that it is their campaign and they are part of it and an active part of it, and not just a follower to a couple of people who are leading it, because that then empowers people. If you do win something, or even if you don't win something, people then feel empowered that they can do it again. And also, if one or two so-called leaders in a leader type structure move on, other people don't have the experience of how to run campaigns. So I think winning a campaign or something you want is important, but I think you can also lose what you wanted to get, but build up a really strong community that's like horizontal and there is no leaders and people feel empowered. You've sort of nearly won something different as you go along.
How can people keep updated with Rebel City news and potentially get involved? Contact Rebel City for books and material. And lastly, how can schools get in touch regarding hosting Rebel City for talks?
There is a specific email for teachers if they want to get us to speak in schools. It is a_levelpoliticsanarchism@yahoo.co.uk, but you can also contact us at londonrebelcity@gmail.com and we will pass it on to the relevant person. We have a mailing list now where we send details out of any times we're going out doing leafleting or handing out the newsletters, or we've got meetings. And again, if you email us at London Rebel City, we will just add you to the email list.
You have the emergence in human society of this thing that's called the state. What is the state? The state is this organized bureaucracy. It is the police department. It is the army, the navy. It is the prison system, the courts, and what have you. This is the state. It is a repressive organization. But the state, and well, you know, you've got to have the police, because if there were no police, look at what you'd be doing to yourselves. You'd be killing each other if there were no police. But the reality is, the police become necessary in human society only at that juncture in human society where it is split between those who have and those who ain't got.
I throw a Molotov cocktail at the precinct. You know how we think. Organize the hood under our ching banners. Red, black, and green instead of gang bandanas. FBI spying on us through the radio antennas. And I'm hitting cameras in the street like watching society. With no respect for the people's right to privacy. I take a slug for the cause like Huey P. While all you niggas try to copy Master P. I wanna be free to live, able to have what I need to live. Bring the power back to the street where the people live. We sick of working for crumbs and filling up the prisons. Dying over money and relying on religion for help. We do for self like ants in a colony. Organize the wealth into a socialist economy. A way of life based off the common needs. And all my comrades is ready, we just spreading the seed. The average black male live a third of his life in a jail cell. Cause the world is controlled by the white male. And the people don't never get justice. And the women don't never get respected. And the problems don't never get solved. And the jobs don't never pay enough. So the rent always be late. Can you relate? We living in a
no more
state.
bondage, no more political monsters, no more secret space launches. Government departments started it in the projects. Material objects, thousands up in the closets. Could have been invested in the future for my comrades. Battle contacts, primitive weapons out in combat. Many never.
You have been listening to the Circle Day radio show on Resonance 104.4 FM. Through the conversation with Rebel City, the London-based anarchist collective, you have become familiar with the true tenets of anarchism. It's nothing more than organising without any ruling classes, whatever the name it goes by. How barbaric, huh?
The best of times.